With Justin Verlander in the fold, is it time to trade a young pitcher for a bat?
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes actually 3 days a week for now, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and RotoGraphs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, been hosting this show since prior to the 2019 season, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day, 3 days a week for now. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there on video. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you are following the show. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just better with FanDuel. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And where we get started is by just jumping into some mailbag questions. We got a ton of great ones. Thank you so much to everyone who asked questions on Twitter. That is, some of you have asked, like, why don't I take questions elsewhere? It's just for simplicity's sake. I'm sorry, but Twitter's where it's at for me to take these questions for now, at least. And we got a lot of questions, so let's get right to them. The first one comes from Francisco, who says, does Justin Verlander signing open up a potential trade of young pitching for a bat? And the obvious answer is that it definitely could, because if you look at their rotation, it's not that there's that many guys you can reliably expect that you know what you're going to get. Like you know what you're going to get for unless something crazy happens with Logan Webb, right? Like he's as reliable as of a pitcher as there is in the game right now. But beyond that, you look at Justin Verlander, going to be 42 years old in February. Robbie Ray, who pitched like just not many innings last year and is coming off Tommy John the prior year. Jordan Hicks, who was a reliever and is a converted starter and wore down the stretch. And then Kyle Harrison, who is a young player who has yet to fully establish himself. And then all the other young options. Tristan Beck, who had elbow surgery in July. Keaton Winn. I was reading Beck, but looking at Winn. Keaton Winn, who had elbow surgery in July. Tristan Beck is another name of note. And then there's a bunch of guys beyond that, too, in Landon Roop, Hayden Birdsong, Mason Black, Trevor McDonald, Carson Ragsdale, Carson Seymour. At least a couple of those guys, I think, may be relief pitching prospects. And then Carson Wisenhunt, who I didn't even mention. No, all of those guys are really starters, maybe with the exception of Trevor McDonald. And did I even say Landon Roop? I don't think I did. And yeah, I did. So all of those guys are on the 40-man except for Carson Wisenhunt, who definitely could be. I mean, the only reason he hasn't been added is that they haven't had to add him yet. So that is a lot of young pitching. And so when you look at, I think back to the reports by Andrew Baggerly that the Giants made legitimate offers. That's a quote. Legitimate offers for Kyle Tucker of the Astros, traded to the Cubs, and for Garrett Crochet of the White Sox, traded to the Red Sox. Those are two high-level players, and the Giants are said by Baggerly, by rival executives, by the way, to have made legitimate offers for those players. And to the point where they were even uncomfortable with what they were willing to give up. And that tells me whether it's pitching or like Luciano and or Matos, maybe it's Kyle Harrison, maybe it's Landon Root, maybe it's Hayden Birdsong. Like that tells me at least one of those names was probably in that package that was being offered. And understandably so, if you're talking about elite talent. And so anyway, getting to the question, I just continue to think that if opportunities arise to, that's so funny that I said arise. that may have been like a Freudian slip, to trade for a bat, like, for example, Luis Arráez, then young pitching is something the Giants have. It's definitely something the Giants have. And a later mailbag question, I'm not sure if it's one that it looks like one that we'll be able to get to today in terms of where it is in the queue, is about Arráez specifically and what it would take, in my opinion, to get him. But essentially, yeah, adding a veteran pitcher, not that you can necessarily rely on even 100 innings out of Verlander, given that he's going to be 42 and he dealt with injuries last year and pitched just 90 innings in 2024, 90 and a third. But you already had depth in terms of young pitching, so adding a veteran certainly makes it more doable to part with a young pitcher. Not that you want to, but if you're getting something good in return that can help you on the offensive side, then it's definitely a possibility. So those are my thoughts on that. Next question. I've got a few about Verlander here. It comes from Garrett, who says, do you think that with the signing of Verlander, a cheaper starting pitcher option, costs $15 million, it could open up the door to spend more on a position player free agent? Or does this signal that cheaper options will be sought out for the rest of the offseason? And so that comes down to what their payroll is. And it's estimated to be at $182 million with the addition of Verlander. And in terms of luxury tax payroll, it's estimated to be about $222 million, with the first luxury tax threshold being $241. So they're only $19 million underneath that first luxury tax threshold. And so when you talk about the top free agents out there, like an Alex Bregman, like he's going to cost even Pete Alonso significantly more than $19 million a year. And so unless they're willing to go over the luxury tax again, which it seemed like that's not something they want to do, and we've heard that they want to lower their payroll from what it was last year, and last year their luxury tax payroll was $252.8 million. 252.8, let's remember that number. And right now it's 222. So there's still, what would that be, 33.8-ish million underneath where they were last year. So that still tells me, if you're trying to significantly reduce payroll, which I'm not endorsing, I'm just trying to be realistic, if they are, then that kind of tells me that these upper tier, not that there's that many upper tier free agents left, players are probably not realistic. I think the most realistic path forward is either cheaper signings or trades for players who are more cost controlled or just essentially cheaper, like Luis Arráez, or signing Ha-Seong Kim, which are, those are literally two questions that come up later on in this mailbag. So anyway, it's hard to see unless they just abandon that idea of reducing payroll at all, or wanting to stay under the luxury tax for, they don't want to go over it a second straight year, which I would imagine they don't. Then it's hard to see them signing like one of these top remaining free agents. So that's probably the most realistic thinking. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, we're going to get to more of your questions, including trade possibilities. All right, so that's all coming up in just a minute. And before we get into it, today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by our good friends over at Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a game at Fenway Park last year. The energy and excitement there was incredible and unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets, which is something I've definitely done in the past, but no more. Recently, this past season, I was looking for tickets to Giants games all over the country. I went to lots of different parks and was using the Game Time app. With Game Time picks, I found amazing deals and could even see the view from my seat before buying. I also went to a playoff game in Milwaukee, and the super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at an unbeatable price. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows you the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, here we go. We're going to get into some more questions. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen. Today, we're 3 days a week right now and back to 5 as we get going with spring training. So just, over a little over a month and the off season will be over. That doesn't mean every player will be signed, but spring training just kind of sneaks up on you like that, in that we're just over a month away. So anyway, getting to more questions, Marcus says, what are the odds the Giants make a trade for Luis Robert, coming off injury and a down year, but not far removed from an all-star season? Only 27 years old, and he's only making $15 million this year, which shouldn't be too scary for ownership. Club options for the next 2 seasons, too. So let's take a look at Luis Robert on FanGraphs, my go-to. You'd think I'm advertising for FanGraphs, but I'm not. Luis Robert is on the White Sox. The White Sox are coming off the worst season ever by a baseball team, and he's had durability issues. If you look at his games played, I don't know exactly what the history has been, but not counting 2020, which was his debut season, games played, we're talking 68, 98, 145, and then 100. So only one season has he managed to play more than 100 games. And he's, like you said, he's only 27 years old. But, I mean, he's a very good player. If you look at what he's done offensively in his career, 267 average, free swinger, only 316 on base, despite that's actually a high batting average in today's environment, and a robust 474 slugging, 207 isolated power, guy who has speed, 23 steals last year, 20 the year before, and again, that's in limited playing time. And he has historically played good defense as well as a center fielder. We're talking 15 defensive runs saved, 27 outs above average. So this is a very good player. He has dealt with a lot of injuries. And so now it's time to look at the contract. And the contract is, I mean, you mentioned it and referred to it, but I just want to clarify. So yeah, he's making $15 million in 2025, and then there are $20 million club options for 2026 and 2027. And both of those will probably be picked up unless he just has like a totally injury ravaged and down season. Maybe not, but the upside is just so tremendous. I think there's a lot of trade value with Luis Robert, and the White Sox would be smart to trade him. The question is when. They have options. Like, they could do it now. They could do it at this year's deadline. If he's having a great season, they could do it next offseason. They just probably don't want to wait until the year before he reaches free agency. But I think they should and probably will eventually trade him. And so what was specifically your question? What are the odds the Giants trade for him? Hey, maybe they're lurking in the weeds here, and like we know, they went after Kyle Tucker, right? So it wouldn't shock me. It would be a big deal, but it wouldn't shock me. The injury concerns are legitimate, but if you could put him in a corner, he's a young player. That's rare that you can acquire a young player who's not, I mean, young players typically aren't rentals, but yeah, I like him a lot. It would just cost quite a bit in terms of prospect capital to get him. perhaps something similar to what Garrett Crochet commanded, and the Giants tried to get Garrett Crochet. And so, because Crochet is like maybe arguably better because he hasn't had these injury issues, and Robert is coming off a down year, but Crochet was also way cheaper. And so that factors into trade value as well. But Robert is a valuable piece, but we do know the Giants have gone after a couple of really valuable pieces in the trade market this year. So I think it's a good call with him as a trade candidate. We haven't heard a lot of noise about this. I'm sure the White Sox are going to try to say that they're not looking to trade him, but I think that they are. It's just they do have time. They don't have to do it now. So they have some leverage, and it would cost a lot. I mean, you'd be talking about, they'd probably want Bryce Eldridge, kind of prerequisite, and you might just not be willing to do that. And I would understand not being willing to do that, but I don't know. So the odds, I wouldn't put them as high, but I would say it's possible. All right, moving on. Another trade possibility, Steve says, you've talked about Luis Arráez as a possible trade option. What do you think is a reasonable offer for him? Can we get him without losing much of the farm if we take on most/all of his salary? And so this is a good example of why contract status matters. Like, I think a lot of people just view trades as like, they just look at the name and the player and they're like, wow, that's all you had to give up for Mookie Betts? But it had everything to do with when the Dodgers got Mookie Betts, that he was just 1 year from free agency. And it's like, wow, that's all you had to give up for Kyle Tucker? Although it wasn't nothing. It certainly wasn't cheap. I think first of all, the Red Sox sent back money. They sent a bad contract to the Dodgers, I should say, not money. The Dodgers took on money to lower the cost in terms of players going back to the Red Sox in that Mookie Betts trade. But, you know, if Betts had like 6 years of cheap team control left, it would have cost something the Dodgers wouldn't have been willing to pay. So anyway, here's a good example, because we turn our attention to Luis Arráez, and the fact is Luis Arráez and the Padres avoided arbitration, so all that means is his 2025 salary has been set now, and he's going to make $14 million. So we know his salary. It's $14 million, and he's a free agent after the season. So it is a 1 year, $14 million contract. And Arráez is a good player, not a superstar player. Probably not as good as Luis Robert. And so you're talking about a guy who costs roughly the same amount, roughly the same amount, and only has the 1 year of team control instead of 3. And by the way, those club options are even better than guaranteed years, because you can get out of it if it somehow turns south on you. And Arráez is not as good when it comes to just overall value. He's better at certain things. He's been far more durable, but he's not as good. So to simply answer your question, I do think that it would, when you say what do I think would be a reasonable offer for him, it's tough because I could probably come up with 40 different reasonable offers, but just to give you like a satisfactory answer, I think that, the Padres would probably want something. I don't know. I'd have to kind of study their roster to know exactly what their needs are. Like, if you were to trade Arráez, what kind of holes would that open up? Like, they've got Jake Cronenworth penciled in at second and Arráez at first. And so, you could mention like a Lamont Wade, but that doesn't really necessarily make sense because he's also 1 year from free agency. So I think that probably one of the pitchers makes sense. And that was the original question about Verlander. So I don't know. For 1 year of Luis Arráez, you might be overpaying you definitely, I think, would be overpaying if you're talking about a Kyle Harrison. So maybe like Hayden Birdsong, something like that would be a fair offer for, like, just something that comes to mind, a name that you're going to know, that Giants fans are going to know, and a pitcher with upside, but it's not It's different than Kyle Tucker because he's not a superstar, and it's different than Robert because you're not talking about 3 years of control. You're talking about 1. And so, I don't know, one of the intriguing young pitchers that the Giants have, maybe you throw in a David Villar or just some other player at some other position. Maybe it's Marco Luciano. Like that his value is down. I think, honestly, that would be an overpay to give up Luciano. But maybe you're down on Luciano. So I don't know. I think Birdsong is probably the most reasonable-ish answer I can give. Maybe you feel like that's too much. But also, for the Padres, it has to be worthwhile. And you're getting 6 years of control of a Birdsong for 1 year of Arráez. That's why the trade would make sense potentially for both sides. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, we're going to talk about a couple of second base options for the Giants and explore if it's worth going after second base and what that would mean for Tyler Fitzgerald. So we'll get into that in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you in part by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just better with FanDuel because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. And I was looking not at football odds right now, but I know the Warriors are playing tonight at the Indiana Pacers, and man, are they heavy underdogs at plus 315 with the spread at plus 10 for the Warriors with minus 110 odds. And of course, you can check out all the football action. I'm still just a little bitter that the Niners aren't in it, but you can still check it out if you're a football fan. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, as promised, more questions and answers. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. The next question comes from John in SoCal, who says, I think the best next signing should be to go after Kim. And this is Ha-Seong Kim, I'm almost certain. If they get Sasaki, fantastic. But that infield defense would be amazing, and Fitzgerald can be a super sub. And at this point in the offseason, with some of the players that they kind of reportedly tried to go after. We know they tried to go after Kyle Tucker. We know they went after Garrett Crochet. Crochet is a starting pitcher. Tucker is an outfielder. So, that it tells me they're willing to make upgrades at positions that would knock certain players out of a role. And I think Yaz would certainly be the guy. Although there's no guarantee Elliot Ramos repeats what he did last year. So Tucker may have, for all we know, Ramos struggles and then Yaz plays left and Tucker plays right and Lee's in center. So an outfielder could still make sense, and hence Luis Robert. But I agree that second base is a position too where they could afford to upgrade. But it's different because Tyler Fitzgerald is very different than Mike Yastrzemski. Mike Yastrzemski is, he's getting up there in age. Like, when I say he's getting up there, this is probably his last year with the Giants. Maybe not. Maybe he's like a backup outfielder for another year or two, but he's going to turn 35 in August, and there's no guarantee he's even on the team to start the season or all season with the Giants. But with Fitzgerald, it's the complete opposite, where he's just starting out his Giants career, and you want to give him opportunities after what he did last year. He doesn't turn 28 until September, but he hit 280, 334 on base, 497 slugging with 15 homers and 17 steals in just 96 games. Projections for him by Steamer are basically 2020, 19 homers, 19 steals. Okay, 19-19. But also a little bit below average overall offense. His expected numbers were significantly worse than his actual results. And he had a 380 batting average on balls in play. I haven't looked this up, but with a minimum of 341 plate appearances, which is what he had, that may be the highest batting average on balls in play in the majors. Now, faster players do have higher batting averages on balls in play because when they put it in play, they reach base more often because they're fast and they can beat stuff out on the ground. But at the same time, like, it certainly would be reasonable to expect offensive regression from Fitzgerald. And do you really want to fully rely on him and not necessarily have a great backup plan at second base? So that is why I've talked about Luis Arráez, and I think a left-handed bat is better. Although, what am I saying? Arráez would not be a second baseman. I think that would allow. I still feel like you need better insurance at second base because right now you're kind of talking about Brett Wisely there, and we've seen how that's played out. It's just not been enough. So if Fitzgerald fails, like, you got a problem. And so that's why I've looked at Alex Bregman as a possibility. But circling back and looking at Ha-Seong Kim, it is intriguing, but it does kind of block out Fitzgerald for a long time because Kim, I don't know what kind of contract he'll be looking for. At this point, it may just be that he's looking for a 1-year deal, and maybe that's not really what the Giants want. Maybe he gets that 1-year deal elsewhere, and Fitzgerald doesn't have a great season, and then maybe next season they try to sign Ha-Seong Kim to be their second baseman. I don't know how it all will play out, but I agree with you. Like, I don't know how much time. I've heard different reports about how much time Kim is expected to miss. He did have shoulder surgery after a injury on a pickoff attempt when he was on base, and it ended his season, that injury. Obviously, if you have shoulder surgery, well, it was late in the year. So anyway, Ha-Seong Kim, 29 years old, turns 30 in October, and I'm trying to see when he had the shoulder surgery. But anyway, I do think he's a very good player, probably best suited for shortstop because he's really good there, but he's also really good at second, and he can play third, and so he could give guys days off. And yeah, Fitzgerald could be that super utility player, but it is worth pointing out Buster Posey has kind of said they don't want Fitzgerald to have to worry about that. They would like to just kind of give him second base and let him just focus on that. But things can change, and if you feel like you need to upgrade your team, and you have to be flexible and nimble and change your plans if things don't go exactly as you expect, which they never do in an MLB offseason, unless maybe you're the Dodgers. So anyway, I would not be opposed to it, and I can definitely see the rationale. So I also want to know how much time he's going to miss, because I don't know what kind of contract he even wants. You know, is it a long-term deal? Is it a 1-year deal? Is it a 2-year deal with an opt-out? Like, it depends, and that kind of maybe would affect their thinking too. James says, thoughts on either bringing in Alex Bregman to play second and moving Fitzgerald to first, or trading for an all-star second baseman and moving Fitzgerald to first. So in both situations, you're moving Fitzgerald to first. I do feel like his athleticism is somewhat wasted as a first baseman, so it's an imperfect fit. But, you know, you could have Lamont Wade Jr. playing first, and Fitzgerald could play somewhere, and somebody could DH. You don't have to DH Fitzgerald. You could DH. I don't know. Like, that's the thing. Adding a second baseman is kind of an imperfect fit for the roster, but it also makes some sense. So, I mean, I've been talking about Alex Bregman. Alex Bregman is, outside of Roki Sasaki, the pitcher who is only going to command $7 million at the most because of the circumstances of his posting from Japan, and then would be on a minor league rookie contract, basically, and under team control for 6 years. Other than him, and he's going to sign at some point in the next 2 weeks. Not for at least another 5 days, and then by 2 weeks from today-ish, he will sign. But other than him, I think Alex Bregman is clearly the best player left on the market. And if you have a chance to bring him in, and he's been a third baseman almost all of his career, but there was a report that he expressed a willingness to play second base. There was somebody who said that they read that as literally like that his representation was like talking to the Giants through the media by saying that, like specifically the Giants. And I don't know. I just think if you have the opportunity to add a player who's that good, you definitely have to consider it. So what do I think? I think that I would love for Alex Bregman to play for the Giants because I think he's really good, and I want the Giants to have really good players. It's imperfect in terms of the fit, but I think you figure it out if you have the chance to add a player of that caliber. All right, the next question, because one of the next two questions is what will it take to get Roki Sasaki? And I'm just going to quickly answer that since I just addressed it. It's not about money. It's not a big contract. It's an international signing pool, which is capped at like $7 million. And the Giants have the lowest, tied with the Dodgers, the lowest international signing pool, international bonus pool, whatever it's called. Theirs is like 4-point-something million, I think. But you can trade for more of this. And so the Giants could make a trade. If they really feel like they can get Sasaki, they could make a trade to get some more space, but it wouldn't go up more than 7 million. 7.1, I think. And so it's not about money. It's simply about selling the player on your team and what his priorities are. And this was the same situation with Shohei Ohtani, and then he chose the Angels, and it shocked the baseball world. And we don't know. The expectation is that Sasaki will end up with the Dodgers or maybe Padres. There's a lot of turmoil going on with the Padres organization right now, though. Just read an article about that and how it could definitely impact a player deciding not to go there right now, like Sasaki. And Sasaki's agent has also said maybe that a big market team wouldn't be the best fit for Sasaki, maybe. And so I think perhaps that gives just an inkling that maybe it's not the Dodgers, but maybe he said that who knows. But it's just simply selling him on your organization. And we've heard some clues about what he's interested in. And it's basically he wants to be great. And so he wants to know that the team can help him be the best he can possibly be. And the Giants do have some good selling points, like their ballpark being very pitcher friendly, Patrick Bailey being a great pitch framer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They also have a really good track record with developing pitchers. And when I say developing, I mean like Kevin Gausman, Carlos Rodon, guys like that. And so it is a different regime now. And I'm sure Sasaki and his agency have taken note of that. But who knows? So anyway, I actually went long on that one, so I don't have time to get to the other question I was going to get to. So that is all the time we have for today. There are tons of great questions left over. I will get to more of them at some point next week. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like the show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again next week. Have a great weekend. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.